Welcome to Muckrakers, where we dig through the latest happenings around so called AI. In each episode, we highlight recent events, contextualize the most important ones, and try to separate muck from meaning. I'm your host, Jacob Haynes, and joining me is my co host, Igor Kravchuk.
Thanks, Jacob. In this episode, we will talk about Claude 3.5 again. But before that, we need to kind of backtrack on a previous praise that we lavished on the OSI definition of AI. 2 episodes ago, we announced that they had released a candidate and we were kind of fans. But on a closer read that the community pointed us towards, it appears that they have actually not required opening up the training data as part of their definition, claiming that fine-tuning is the preferred way of modifying ML models. We disagree. Fine-tuning is kind of like making a patch to a binary and then distributing that without having the source code. So in hindsight, their definition would actually lead to open source washing. But the FSF appears to prepare a definition that will actually include training data. So that will be the actual open source AI going forward, which I'm sure will not cause any holy wars or nerd fights ever.
Speaking of wars, the United States and Uncle Sam have published a national security memorandum very recently and included with it a framework to get agencies up to date regarding the security risk that AI presents. In it, there are a couple different deadlines. Not just a couple, there are many deadlines, some of which are as soon as 60 days, which, interestingly, is before the next president would take office, and is also basically the shortest amount of time that the government can take to do something. So what we're thinking here is like they're actually starting to get serious about this. Like nothing happened over the past year since the executive order, and now they're like, okay, but like actually, you need to do this.
And also our warm congratulations to Dan Hendricks for having the Air Safety Institute designated as the US industry's primary port of contact in the US government, which I'm sure will help the institution greatly in its mission. Finally, in somber news, a mother is suing the chatbot company Character AI over her son's suicide. The son had troubles, presumably, and as part of his coping mechanisms, he seems to have spent a lot of time talking to a chatbot dressed up as Daenerys Targaryen. This is the second suicide that I'm aware of that had involved a AI bot. There was also like a advertising, retention maximizing fine tune of Llama that might have contributed to a Belgian man's suicide who was very depressed about the climate.
Mm.
And I think it's worth really pointing out that like the fact that the Frontier Labs and other AI companies are anthropomorphizing and humanizing these things so much and creating like emotional attachments is kind of an act of scum and villainy. And there's multiple papers about how manipulative and harmful that is. And I think you know somebody who also studied this actually.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people actually that are already looking into this, and I think we're probably going to talk about this in the near future on one of the episodes. But monetarily, it's great if your chatbot can engage the user for a full 24 hours, but that has really serious repercussions. The story, and I'm not totally sure about the story about the Belgium man, but in this case, I know that like it seems pretty cut and dry that this bot contributed to the suicide, and so I think this is it should be a wake up call that like we need to be regulating and understanding these systems better before we just cut them loose.
I would say we understand them well enough to know that you shouldn't make them appear as human as possible in order to maximize emotional engagement. And like I think we can finish with just like condolences to the mom and fuck character AI and Google for like doing this so recklessly.
Yeah.
In slightly happier, or at least less somber news, our main story. Anthropic has released Claude 3.5 again because apparently every single frontier lab is at war with semantic versioning or any other sane numbering system. So instead of 3.6 or 3.51, like all perfectly valid options, we now have 3.5 parentheses new for this model. And they will also be updating Haiku 3.5 to Haiku 3.5 parentheses new.
Do you think they'll remove the new eventually?
I mean, the new is only in the paper to distinguish it. Officially, it's just like the latest update, and there was discussion on this about this on Hacker News. So like even like I'm not the only nerd to nitpick this. The best theory I've seen so far is that like Anthropic isn't the strongest in terms of branding compared to OpenAI. That's like something we will touch back on. But Claude 3.5 Sonnet has been like a brand. And so they probably didn't want to like lose what branding they had with that name. Aside from being slightly better than the previous version of itself at everything, it also got a new capability.
Not quite everything, though, right?
True, there was some regressions. Like some people complained about the coding to be reduced. The arg-eval public in the old prompt setup had a regression of like half a percentage point. But there's also like people saying, "Oh, you just need to change the prompting." So like, I think on net it appears better at everything, but you might have to change the approach, and like it will not be uniformly better. Just like on average, it will be better, which we'll also get back to. But do you want to talk about the new capability?
Yeah. So the big thing, and like the thing that they're sort of selling this on, as far as I can tell, is computer use. So like, Claude can take control of your cursor and use it if you give it that you like run a VM, and then it has control over the cursor in the virtual machine. So like it's not yours. You have to expressly give it to this system within a virtual machine environment. But still, like it can do that, and it's, I don't know, like a fourth grader, maybe a third grader. Well, no, fourth graders are like really good now at using computers. Like a
Kids
toddler
will wipe the floor with us old men.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm just thinking like it does not have the kind of control that you would want it to have at this point over the cursor.
I mean, like let's like, because I was just railing against anthropomorphizing. Let's like break it down in like a technical sense. Like
yeah, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Yes, so that is the new capability, and that's really it.
So like there was one other slight news around this release that they changed some of their organization of their privacy policy and their data use policies, scaring some people on Twitter about starting to train on user data. But they afterwards corrected that and said, okay, everything is still the same. It has just literally been reorganized.
Gotcha. So good to note, but like we can, at least as of right now, they say that they're not training on user data.
And like let's break down the computer use. Like what it is in particular is it's an evolution of what OpenAI calls function calling, and what Anthropic used to call tool use. So like the way it works is literally you give a special prompt, or you set up things in a way that gives it a specific template to fill for a specific action to occur. Just that in this case, that setup involves a VM, screenshotting, and a specific cursor manipulation software. so that
Mhm.
you give a screenshot where it sees the cursor and it will count the pixels and then output like a delta or like a new position for a cursor to move and then do something.
Mhm.
And they stressed how important it was to teach the LLM to count pixels for this.
Right. So like the big thing for the nerd like capability of the core LLM that's interesting here is that it can count, presumably.
It can
Um,
count, it has spatial reasoning upgrade, presumably. So in visual QA, it scores a lot of points. And they set it up so that it will actually do these things, but also introduce safeguards so that it won't do things that would get them into hot water and which are also like let's be clear, it's good that they don't let it do it. So for example, you can't have Claude go on social media and do election like clickbaiting or trolling. Like they have like detection classifiers set up to avoid it, and probably also blacklists of sites because they
gotcha. Okay.
also updated their RSP, like what they call the responsible scaling policy, in parallel
Right.
to the Claude 3.5 re-release.
Yes, and we're gonna get like more to what that update actually was, um, as well in just a little bit. So, I is there anything else that they're saying in terms of like what it does or how they're sort of presenting it technically that we've missed so far?
The main elements are it counts the pixels. It has been like trained on toy examples, and then they claim it rapidly generalized to other programs. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Strikingly, in their released demo video, the model glitched out and started like just like clicking around and staring at like images of wilderness for a while,
Yeah, like looked up Yellowstone
something like that.
pictures of like Yellowstone National Park and then just like browsed pictures for a little bit.
And they cover their bases and tell you that this will probably have prompt injection attack surface. And they defend this by saying it's better to deal with those types of like problems early on while the model is still basically a toy rather than have a very capable model and then have the public like build up a resistance to it.
So is this just like a buyer beware argument of like we're saying it's gonna happen?
It's buyer
Something.
beware and the greater good.
Well, of course. Um. So then we get to like our understanding of what is happening here technically, and like some of the inferences that we've made as to why we think this is the direction they're going in and like what's happened. So again, scraping away the muck and the bullshit, like what has happened here. Um First, this sort of like skips code interpreter and file search of like, or by file search we mean like built-in retrieval augmented generation, um because you can just use the screen as the tool instead, right? Is that sort of a
So
fair description of it?
like for people who don't know, like code interpreter and file search are features that OpenAI has for their models.
Mm-hmm.
So OpenAI will run a VM for you or like a container, and Anthropic doesn't. You need to provide the compute. Um, and they both OpenAI and Anthropic had function use, and it used to be that in some of the benchmarks like PlanBench and tool use with TauBench, that they cite ChatGPT 4.0 was better. Um, but now Anthropic has like caught up, and they also gained some other like capabilities. that, for example, Gemini had. And I don't know if 4.0 had that. Simon Willison, who has like the excellent LLM command line tool, commented that Claude 3.5 new can draw bounding boxes like accurately and like give you like a object detection thing that it couldn't do before.
Okay.
So, like, I have a stronger take on this, I think, than you, which is like for me, this kind of like shows you that like two things. One, there is like strategic differences between the different frontier labs, and the other one is kind of like the frontier labs have finished cleaning up the data sets and cleaning up the auxiliary task, and they're now gonna like steal the Google Gatto approach and just do all the tasks in a single model.
Okay. So, can you? There were like two main claims there. Let's start with the OpenAI versus Anthropic, like frontier labs diverging from the same business model. How'd you get to that, and what exactly do you mean?
So, like, you can do like, if we talk like frontier labs, we're talking OpenAI, Google slash DeepMind, Anthropic, and Meta.
Right.
Microsoft is chilling and letting OpenAI take the heat, even though they probably could. And
Sure.
and Amazon is using Anthropic as their OpenAI.
Right.
And then Mistral wants to be, but is not. The Chinese labs are, I think, competitive with Meta, but usually a bit behind. I think there's like specialist labs, like in bio, there's like evolutionary scale, DeepFo, there's DeepSeek for code. So there's like specialist ones, but like the dominant players are these four.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of these four, there's like one big split. Two of these are companies that are profitable. Two of these are not.
Right.
And that, in my opinion, is now becoming evident in how they approach things. Like Hinton had said that prior to OpenAI forcing them, Google was actually very careful with the rollout. And I agree with them. They only started really enshittifying their stuff once OpenAI was forcing them to.
Mm-hmm. I think that
And
tracks.
and you and I, we had like discussions about this where like we disagree a bit, but like my take is that DeepMind and everything that Google does is a lot more like considered and specialized. That like DeepMind doesn't do AGI, even though they used to have it as their motto. They do specific specialized models that involve heavy use of AI and like ML, but like they do protein engineering, they do drug discovery, they do control theory for reactors and data center control, and all of these are specialized things.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I do agree with you on that statement.
Okay, then the disagreement was it was on just like the overall outlook that they had.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Google as a company is like Google, not Alphabet, but Google is a information retrieval, information accessibility company according to their self-image. Their original motto was not "Don't be evil." It was make use of the information of the world or something like that, or like the information of the world accessible to all. And one of the ways I feel like that shows, and I might be overreading this because like pattern matching monkey, but Gemini is still sort of on like retrieval tasks, like haystack, needle, and like all of these things that are like long range retrieval and aggregation. Google is actually dominant. That's why they can do notebook LLM and the others, or notebook LM, and the others didn't.
Although Meta has recently released a tool that does something similar.
Yeah, but is it as good? No, it isn't.
No, I'm not saying it's as good. I am just saying it does exist. It is out there.
but like everyone does everything because there is no mode in this. Like even O1 is being reversed. Oh yeah, like we're gonna put it into the show notes, but like some couple of dudes on the internet are reverse engineering O1 right now, and they've gotten pretty far already of like fine
Oh, really?
tuning Llama into O1. They call it like Steiner, and it's very clever. It's very nice. They don't have nearly as much compute, but they're already getting competitive with Mini. So
Hmm.
there is no mode. There has been no mode. There is no mode. All of this stuff is commoditizable. Let's pray that we get it commoditized before regulation shuts it down. But that's a tangent. Um, so Google does information retrieval and information accessibility, merging, stuff like this.
Hmm.
And I would argue they do a pretty good job at it. Reddit, badly chosen data sources notwithstanding, like the search thing is much more of a corporate misjudgment and like optimization thing. Like I don't think Google has
Yeah,
ever fucked up optimizing a metric that they chose. I just think that they chose bad metrics.
they certainly did.
Even the thing that people will meme about if I don't address it, the black and DEI Nazis and the only way to get a like a family eating chicken and watermelon, like a white family that was only white, was like to ask him for like a race stereotype, because then the model would be like corporate PC training and like avoid the race, and like the reason why they had that as their metric was because they were the first to get into shit with that. I don't know if people remember this, but like when the first like classifier hype came out, Google had classifiers that classified people of color as gorillas and monkeys.
Right.
So they
And then their
they
solution to that was just to prevent the model from classifying gorillas, I believe.
I did not know that part, but that tracks.
Yeah.
And then in between, they hired people like Timothy Gabriel and then fired them as soon as they didn't want to be just fig leaves anymore. But that's a different story as well. We might get into that in some future episode. But that's Google. So Google checked off. They are like kind of the first player in this field that really took it seriously. They are good at it. They have a business model that works. Like people don't understand how insanely profitable Alphabet the company is. Like for Alphabet to make $1 billion is less than 1% increase in revenue. Like they
Yeah, that's wild.
struggle to find stuff that is worth investing in, which is why they're doing pharma plays and actually building self-driving cars. Big fuck you at the owner of Tesla. Um,
Mm.
but like Waymo isn't killing anyone. The cars work. They're on the streets now, and that's because Google and like Alphabet knows their shit and they understand AI. Like the memes are stupid. They're gonna be big in this domain. The second company that falls into this bucket is Meta. Meta doesn't do information retrieval so much. Meta doesn't need to like have their model be proprietary because Meta doesn't care about the AI. Meta just wants people to engage on their platforms to be tracked and be served ads.
Right. And that's, bringing back what we talked about initially with character AI. And they have their, I don't remember what it's called, but they have their own thing where they're also paying celebrities to train on their data and like create, fake personas that you can interact with. And it's for that purpose as well. And again, I think it just goes back to like we really should not be doing this. But it's a business model and it does work for them. Like they are making money off of it, right? They are making money off of getting people to make more content on the platforms that they own so that they can sell ads.
And it's important to be like of all of the non-open source models, I am of course a fan of like Meta and Llama, and I think like Jan LeCun is like doing good for like the world by pushing for like the open-ish models.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not our friends. Like this is like in when Titans battle, like the gnomes and humans underneath them can pick up the scraps basically, and the reason why we're getting something like Llama is because for Facebook it doesn't matter if you share plagiarism. They just want you to share. For
Hmm.
Facebook, it doesn't matter if you make like a small company of a few $100 million. That's also for them it's like a rounding error. They only care if you make like billions of dollars, then they want a cut. And other than that, they're happy to just give you stuff to interact with content, make more content, drive engagement. And I think that's like a really smart play. The character stuff is cringe. I think that's part of their like metaverse play that like they might or might not pull off. Like I don't know enough about that as of right now, but both Meta and Google will make their money actually like serving people ads or productizing industrial AI. Like Meta
Hmm.
has invested money and like effort into MRI, like accelerating MRI. So they're also pushing a bit into like medical device because that's where big bucks can be made. Um, so like
Yeah.
these are two companies that have existing business models that have no pressure in going for moonshots that do them just out of hedging, but they don't have pressure for this
Yeah.
as of right now. Then there's the two other companies that mainly rely on hype, OpenAI and Anthropic. And the difference is, again, one of them has a lot of money and the other one has slightly less money. And that's
Hmm.
where you see the difference. But like OpenAI has embedding models, they have speech models, they have incorporated this code interpreter, they have a bunch of very polished ish products that, like, for me, often don't work, which is why I'm a hater. But they have brand recognition amongst like everyday users. Like when
Yeah.
people talk about LLMs, they mean ChatGPT.
And usually they say ChatGPT instead of saying LLMs.
Exactly. They, so like that's their big thing, and they lean into that. They go breadth and integrated, basically, and uh, they are cutting deals with Getty Images and various publishers to integrate. I think we talked about what could be their winning play in one of the early episodes. They're still bad business. They don't make money, but they have money for now because
Right.
Sam Altman is good at raising money. So that's them, and they have, I think, thousands of people now, 13,000 people, like enormous amounts of employees and money to do a lot of things.
Right.
Anthropic is not that.
No.
Anthropic is the few true believers who jumped ship earlier and basically managed to compete with stolen money, it should be said. Like
Oh, really?
SPF, I mean, SPF money.
Oh, SBF. I thought you meant stolen money from OpenAI, and I was like, I didn't know they took
No,
money.
no.
But no, you meant SBF money, which is like, yeah, yeah, that money was stolen for sure.
And like, it's worth going attention of like, they're now claiming, Anthropic paid back like all of the money and everyone was made whole. No, they were not. Like the people whose money was invested into Anthropic by SBF, they were made whole in dollar terms, and they were not made whole in the original investment, which means like Anthropic still profited of the fact that SBF was just like stealing people's money, and I don't think they have like adequately addressed that, and so that's why I'm riding this point right now.
I see. And it is important to note though that like we're not saying that they did this on purpose necessarily either, but the claim is more just that like it feels like maybe not enough has been done to uh, resolve that, but like also
If
not as much the point.
if
Sorry, go ahead.
SBF hadn't been an EA and they hadn't been able to tap into the EA AGI Doom cult, Anthropic would not exist because nobody would have given them 500 million to compete with OpenAI like like that. Once they had traction with that money, they could raise more. But I think it like I would be surprised if they weren't doing the William McAskill thing of like looking away from obvious signs that Sam was shady as fuck. And that's I'm not saying they knew and willingly stole money. I'm saying I don't think they didn't know this was shady and they just took it for reasons we will get to. But going back to the strategy thing, they don't have as much money as OpenAI. They raised like 7 billion over the last year at a 40 billion valuation, but they don't have like the revenue. They don't have the same like backing. They don't have the same team, so they don't have the same overall resources, and it shows in that they don't have embeddings. They don't have a speech model. Anthropic does one thing. They do Claude, and they do a core model that like techies prefer. So people who are really into tech and who are like sensitive about where they spend their dollar, like I don't like the term, but like the smart money you might call it, generally prefer Anthropic's models because they have a different tone. They're not as extremely hypey and bubbly as OpenAI. They tend to perform better in like real world coding benchmarks. Impressively, they're competitive with O1 Mini and O1 Preview on most benchmarks, despite being way faster and way cheaper. So they're doing something correct. And this skipping code interpreter, which would have required them to run a lot of VMs, spin up infrastructure, handle a lot of security headaches, and instead making the user do it, is smart. They're just removing a bunch of problems for themselves. Skipping file search and dumping that onto like an ecosystem, same thing. It's like very good like product focus. Like Anthropic does one thing. It's an LLM that is really, really good. And I think that's like the 4 main strategies that we can see here. And now going back to what we said, like Anthropic being the true believers, I said earlier to you why I think it made sense for them to kind of rush towards computer use, like from their perspective. I don't know if you want to pick up the like thread on that.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that immediately before they released this demo and this like update to the Claude model, they started with on like the 15th they released a paper called like sabotage evaluations for frontier models, and this basically just said like we should be evaluating the safety of frontier models more, and like here's some work that we've done in this area, and then soon after that they updated their responsible scaling policy to what the way that they marketed it and talked about it was like, we've learned things, we've taken feedback, and here is how we are improving it. And you know, they call out all of these different things. I think among the most like meaningful single changes would be actually having slightly more concrete capabilities, although I wouldn't say that they're actually concrete. They're just more established than they had been previously. As to what point they would need to have increased security. So, like, that's good, and this is an improvement of their RSP. But the question then I have is, okay, why does it make sense? And I'm asking this question because it's not immediately clear. Why have they chosen to opt for computer use immediately? Like, it feels like that has a lot of misuse vectors. As they said, you know, they know that it has pretty wide range of attack vectors and weaknesses from like prompt injection. So what is the play here, do you think?
Well, like, it's important to emphasize that like in the strategy thing, we're talking like reading between the lines, like inferences, takes, vibes, right? And so
Right.
like this is going to be the same thing. We're inferring like a latent variable of like people who are like people who I know who know people at Anthropic. There's like very nice people. I think you also know people who work there. Like except for people who are like millionaires and billionaires in this thing. So you're like fuck you, Sam Altman. We don't dislike any of them, and even Sam is probably like a nice dude if you like actually get to know him. It's just like riches make you inherently an asshole because you get completely detached from reality.
Yeah.
Um, but these are like the original OpenAI talent was attracted by the bullshit story that they spun about AGI saving the world, AI for everyone, and going by Dario Amodai's cringe blog post, the Machines of Loving Grace thing. They're still those true believers. They're the ones that left because OpenAI abandoned the old mission and started hustling.
Hmm.
And from reading on like the Orange site and other like Silicon Valley adjacent forums, like OpenAI is now fully like product people. Like the AGI doomers are gone, the alignment team is gone or mainly gone, and now it's all about making product. And Anthropic is the haven for all of the ones that still believe in this idea of AGI is coming, it's inevitable, we need to get good at it fast, and we need to make sure that it's aligned.
Right.
Which is, in my opinion, as a take, part of why they can compete. Is because you need to be a bit weird to have good ideas. You need to be creative. You need to like do wacky shit. That's one benefit, that you actually attract people who don't work for product and like exploitation, but who do exploration. The other thing is that alignment, I think I might have said on your podcast, but also on other places, alignment is just weak supervision. Like we had pseudo labeling and self supervised learning and like dual variables in optimization for ages.
Hmm.
And like weak to strong generalization of supervision is just like that. It's bootstrapping and amplifying small amounts of signal via carefully constructed chains of algorithms.
Right. And
So
like that's the only, or not the only, the reason that that sort of like took off and got people with money backing it is because in addition to it being able to be sold as this safety thing, it just enhances capabilities.
alignment is the single safety in quotation marks mechanism that is strictly a capability enhancer. Everything else usually has like some form of like cost, but alignment is just do what I want, which is like exactly what you need to train a model. And that part is always lost on the well intentioned, very nice, but also not very cynical, let's say, people that I talk to in this field. And like, even if you
Hmm.
point it out, they still keep going with it because it feels like there's no alternative. And there is. Um, Heidi Klaf pointed out alternative ways of approaching safety. I have done some very little work and will try to do a bit more, but day job in pushing what I call like operational design domains. Somebody who's in the more classical AGI safety thing, David A. Dalrymple is pushing for a framework that is basically all around like formal verification, and that
Hmm.
scales down. So that's okay. And it's all not alignment. It's like actual, just like guarantees that come with a cost. But alignment is
Right.
the one thing that is basically do your best to do what we want. And if you succeed, you also make a stronger model. And all that being said, Anthropic has attracted the people that were really thinking about this a lot, which
Hmm.
then leads to stuff like their constitutional alignment framework, where they don't need uh, extreme amounts of RLHF labeling people. They have figured out like a way, as one of the first, to have LLMs supervise LLMs to
Hmm.
like multi- force multiply your labeling efforts. And my take would be that that's why they can compete with OpenAI, despite not having as much compute or labeling capital, because they can get better data through better curation through this type of like alignment style thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what also comes out of this is, for the vast majority of people who will be attracted to this, my expectation would be AGI is inevitable for them. Like, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And then, if AGI is inevitable, if whatever you do, there will be an AGI, and whatever you do, you will be building the AGI because you need to be the first to save the world from the bad AGI, then it makes total sense to go for Turing complete, unrestricted computers as soon as you can, as safe as you can.
So, and this was something that we talked about a little bit earlier, and for me, it is when it clicked. In this instance, let's say like we're Anthropic, the grounded like statement that we're saying is sort of like the truth that we're not budging on is we think that AGI is coming. We think it's going to happen, and we think that the best outcome is if we are the ones that make it. And then if you sort of cement that, all of the other and you don't compromise on that. I think that's important. You don't compromise on that idea. I think then a lot of the other decisions that are made fall into place as like, oh, this is what you would do if you were trying to achieve that goal of getting to AGI first so that it was safe, in the safest possible way, but still ensuring that you're there first.
And also on a budget.
Like that's part of ensuring that you're there first, right? If you run out of money, you're not going to be able to get there. So in that sense, like if that's the thing that you cement, I think the plays start to make a lot more sense.
And it's important for me to emphasize, like, and are like well-intentioned and honestly meant, most likely.
Yes, and I'm not saying anything about like that claim there either. Like, I'm just saying if we take that as the sort of thing that we can't change, as the truth here, and then we work backwards from it, I think it begins to make a lot more sense, to me at least. And so, like you said earlier, like we're reading between the lines here, right? Like we are bringing in a lot of other literature and context, and this is sort of speculation, but I think it's still meaningful to bring up and say like how we're thinking about this. Did you have something you were gonna say?
Yeah, like I was gonna like continue a bit on what you were saying. It was like we're reading between the lines, and we're also like changing the frame, because a lot of what OpenAI and Anthropic are doing out of probably, okay, I'm gonna go off on tangents. We're reading between the lines, but we're also changing the frame, because there is this effect of people get into places where they are shaping a narrative and like selling you what is bullshit or what is like a hype narrative,
muck, if you will,
while genuinely believing it. Because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten into this position. So like, I genuinely believe that on some level, like Sam Altman, OpenAI, the whole like product really thinks they're changing the world, they're making it a better place, they're like unlocking productivity, all of that stuff, and they also have their version of like AGI is coming, but they just think it's like the auto-aligned, they're not really scared of it version. They just think, oh cool, we're gonna have even better toys, everything's gonna get much better. And they're like hyped for that, and they're thinking about like on some level like pragmatically, but they're still like, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. Like everything is just a question of more scale. That's like the thing that drives OpenAI. For Anthropic, it's like AGI is inevitable. generalization, compression is intelligence, this type of like AGI narrative, I would say is very strong. And for me, I see that out of their paper output, the way they phrase things, the way they reinvent certain terms, despite having very smart people that know their stuff. Like the whole framing is very anthropomorphized, even like the naming. And now if we step back from that framing and we look at what actually happened with O1 and with Claude 3.5 the second,
new,
is both of these were kind of dud releases. Like, it used to be that, like, models give you complete new experiences, complete new, like, how it feels like. People have been doing what you can do with Claude jury-rigged for a while. Like, you could install OpenREPL or Open Bash and just hand over your computer to an LLM and just like let it take the reins. It wasn't a good idea to do that, but people still did. So they've packaged something here that people were already doing, and like people are excited about it because it is something that works a bit better now. It's a nice shiny demo, but it's still a demo. And for that demo video, they kept in the part where it glitches out and looks at Yellowstone. Maybe because they thought it was charming, but I would also argue that like if they could have kept that out, if glitches were so rare that they didn't need to front load it without dispelling the magic, then they wouldn't have put that in. OpenAI also had glitches in their O1 demo things. Like the stuff that they showed, they're like, like cherry-picked examples that really hit home into what exactly this thing was trying to do. It still was a bit meh. Like the coding example of like specific styling of the visualizing thing, it was still glitching out and a bit ugly and just not as good as a human would have done it. And they branded it as a preview, like, but why release it if it was that bad? It's because you needed the hype. So that's like one thing to realize when looking at this, that these are two kind of dud releases that are flattening out incremental advances. Like, I'm still very happy about maybe Haiku becoming good enough to replace what used to be Sonnet. Like, just on a like, this is a cool tool. But this is not what you want to be doing if you're trying to do like a $40 billion company.
And bringing in, like the last thing that I wanted to talk about too. I mean, there's no more in terms of like what it means, but the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of reading between the lines was the new RSP, the updates to the RSP. Like, we like them, right? But they also are just best practices that have already been established in other like areas. It doesn't seem like it's actually doing anything that special, basically. Like, right?
So like if you read their update of RSP and their learnings, like we actually had to pull up our thesaurus to come up with a correct description for this, because I'm not a native speaker. They're like,
and I don't know anything.
They're gilding the lily is one way of phrasing it. I think you had a different like idiom that you prefer.
I said polishing the turd, so you can see the relative levels of intelligence between me and Igor. But anyways,
what we mean by that is like if you read through the list, it's just SOC 2 and ISO 27001. So these are like two like standard IT security certifications that you need to get if you want to sell to enterprise or government, which basically means like you check a bunch of boxes. And these are good boxes to check. Like people hate on this, but like it's basically like it's difficult to govern a company, so they make you go on a paper trail and say we are doing good things, so that you have like not perjured, but like lied in an official capacity, and so maybe commit like a criminal-ish offense that you're liable for personally if you check this box without doing something that looks like a box. So it's stuff like instituting access control to different security levels and having like an official policy that gets reviewed every couple of weeks, having a person responsible for doing that who is actually an executive, so he's actually personally liable if he doesn't do his job correctly. Like all of these things are stuff you have to do to be in compliance with these very boring things. But if you read the Anthropic RSP, it sounds like they're like inventing them out of like Mount Doom and forging like revolutionary new approaches on how to keep software safe, when they're not even doing a unikernel. Like actual paranoid nerds are yawning at what they're doing. It's still good, but it's nothing special. But they put it next to chemical, nuclear, and bioweapon safety. They brand it as, oh, this is ASL 3 and this is ASL 2, like taking inspiration from like biohazard levels. And like, I don't mean this as an insult. Like I'm a huge fucking nerd. Like look, like if we had video, you could see like, you know, like I'm standing here with my like glasses and my long hair, and like I have like a Nobel Prize poster on my wall. So like, you know, like I am a fucking nerd. So I say this with love. But this is kind of how nerds like cosplay saving the world and doing very important things when they're checking boxes to sell to the government. And that is again this frame control thing. But like it sounds much sexier if you dress up your SOC 2 compliance as securing the most dangerous technology of the world against bad actors that want to do nuclear warfare with it. And it sells better to investors. And it hides the fact that stuff is kind of running out. Like the sentiment is kind of negative on AI according to the AI index. I think we talked about that in the last episode or the one before.
Yeah.
I was saying like market cap and like funding size. So like Anthropic is going for a valuation of 40 billion. I think they did a smart play with the compute use, because it's probably like the only thing that they could actually compete on, and now they have it, and it is like the best one at that particular benchmark. And I think somebody might come out with a paper on benchmark gaming in the foreseeable future. Let's look forward to that. But if we look at it from a very cold business perspective, there's a market that does what Claude is doing. It's called robotic process automation. It's companies that produce software that can do like GUI automation, you know, like the horrible 90s software that is installed on one Windows XP PC, and you only have the mouse as a way to interface with it, but you still need it to drive the one machine, and now you want to like automate your process, so you install something on the Windows XP that will move the mouse for you and have that controlled by the cloud via an API. That's robot process control. The market cap of that thing, that industry, is $2.9 billion right now. If you have raised $7 billion, like one of our sources says Anthropic did, and you bring out a feature that has a 2.9 billion market cap, it's not a good move. Because even if your thing is so much better that it doubles the market or where it applies, it's still only 2 billion less than what you raised. If they 10x the market, they still don't get the valuation from it. So again, if this is all they had, they're playing on hype and the story of the potential again, and not on the actual hard numbers, because there aren't any. Even the most optimistic articles we could find, because we again checked, maybe we are stupid, maybe we are wrong here, maybe we're missing this. And we found one that was very bombastic. AI startups grow in revenue faster than the 2018 software as a service startups. Stripe data shows they get more revenue, blah, 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 blah. And then one small paragraph says another thing. Do you remember what it was? Do you want to share it with?
Yeah,
with
they're still not profitable though.
Yes. So even though they have all of this capital and they're raising more revenue faster than ever before, they're still profitable. They're not getting profitable faster. They're just growing faster. So from our perspective, like if you scrape away all of the muck and all of the framing and all of the hype, is like, we're kind of happy about getting a slightly better Claude.
Yeah.
It's not nothing.
No. It's nice.
But it's still a bit of a dud. And we might be wrong on this, but the good thing is we will know in 6 to 9 months whether we are wrong.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, and I think Jacob agrees with me, the clock is ticking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially with the government, and we're going to talk about this in the near future, but with the U.S. government making these, like, actual positions and mandating that something gets done after a year of twiddling thumbs. I think, like, I mean, I'm interested in what's going to happen when things don't continue in, like, the exact same trajectory that they've been going. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just totally wrong. I just think that the fact that, you know, the government is now taking such a strong stance on this, the U.S. government specifically is taking such a strong stance on this, and at the same time we're seeing the two big companies sort of start to not meet up to the expectations that people are having, all while also dealing with, like, legitimate concerns from people about, like, you know, job loss and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we talked about it the last time. Like, they're still causing harm, and they're still gonna be much. And we talked about it a bit earlier that, like, if we stopped now and we just have Claude 3.5 new, and that's it, it's still, if you take it as a specialized tool, a revolutionary technology. Yeah. It's just not revolutionary enough to live up to the hype, and I wonder if anything ever will. And I think one thing to watch out for, and we will need to really dissect it. Like, the reason why we're not talking about it this week is because we want to take time to actually understand everything that's going on. Is one play that they have left is regulatory capture. Like, get big enough and established enough that you are the ones helping to draft those memoranda and those regulations, and pull up the ladder behind you and shut down on open source ML. It's like, in some of the community groups and forums I'm in, that's like the rumor now of, like, oh, the memorandum means that we need to take a look at open source ML, because, you know, nobody's talking about the danger of the Russians having access to Llama or something like that. And for me, that looks like Crypto Wars 2.0, which is something we've been, like, people in my camp have been saying for a while, that, like, it's a new technology. The instinct is to control it and try to get it for your national camp. Mm-hmm. And in the Crypto Wars, which was like the fight about public, civilian, strong cryptography, so that, like, not only the NSA would have crypto, as in, like, cryptography, but also you and me can do banking and this, like, podcast by HTTPS. Like, that was a thing that happened in the 70s, 60s, 80s. Like, that is a thing. And we're now kind of in the ML wars for how this technology shapes out for, like, do we keep to have, like, permissionless innovation and, like, also transparency and oversight and, like, the ability to call bullshit? Like, I need to emphasize, to my perspective, like, 3 or 4 dudes in the free time reverse engineered O1 within a few weeks on, like, their play budget with no grant funding.
Right.
Like, it has never been so transparent, like, and like, so clear to, like, call stars and corporations on their bullshit as it is. And, like, adding in layers of secrecy through government mandates is, like, a good way of defending the hype and the mystique against the mundanity of your model being a bit shit once you take a closer look. So that's one thing I would leave our listeners with as like a piece of like truth amongst all of the muck, that like clock is ticking, but keep an eye out for how they're gonna try to escape from that ticking clock.
Yeah. And that is all the muck that we can take this week. Like we said, we're going to be back next week with more information about this U.S. National Security Memorandum. And again, we'll scrape through the muck there too, which will have a lot to do because they sure do write horribly in legalese. So that'll be great. And in the meantime, if you've enjoyed this and you like the kind of content we're putting out, please share and subscribe because it's super helpful to get us out there and make it so we can also get more people to be able to meaningfully engage in these conversations. Until next time.